Okay, I can do it. Get this running first.
Okay.
There we go.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call this Climate Action Plan Committee of the City Council to order. And Judy, could you run through the roll?
Certainly. Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Councilor Gonzalez appears to be absent. Councilor Hoy,
Here.
Councilor Stapleton on behalf of Trevor Phillips.
I'm
She's
here.
here. Okay. Do we have any public comments?
I did not receive any public comment this month.
Okay, then let's go to the new summary sheets.
Yeah, so item 4, we'll move right into this. Our first discussion item was actually room for questions for this committee. We submitted 15 different summary sheets to this group with the agenda packet for this month. And we had, I think, 12 last month, and we've got another 12 coming next month. So there really hasn't been a lot of time for discussion. We've had presentations that ran right up to the end. So just wanted to make sure we carved out a few minutes. If indeed there's any questions, we can look back through.
Are there any questions? And it'd be over the whole packet that we've received over time, right?
Certainly, yeah, it's a lot of information, but we can circle back on anything.
You know, going over these just out of curiosity, most of them are low. Is that kind of where we are still working our way through the low?
You're referring to the greenhouse gas emissions?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a large percentage of these that are indeed listed as a low reduction emissions. So I'm going to speak to that quickly on our next item. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good question.
I had a few questions, and I just actually got word that I was attending this meeting yesterday morning, so I haven't had tons of time to prepare, but I did read through the agenda for today. And I did have questions on a number of them. I was wondering, maybe I'll just start at NR 03. And that was talking about getting an IPM coordinator and getting the plan in place for the city. And is that a new hire that we got, or was that somebody in-house that, you know, kind of wanted to take on this project and had the expertise? And then who did we reach out to for help in getting that plan pulled together? I know that we're kind of at the 80% maybe side of that plan. And then I'm just wondering, you know, did we reach out to Oregon Department of Agriculture or OSU Extension? Who's helping us with that plan?
Okay, good questions. Patricia, I'm hoping that you know a little bit more. We've got quite an extensive summary on that, but I don't know if ODA in fact was consulted, or if we were planning to bring, I don't think we were planning to bring other staff on. Do you mind jumping in?
Hi, Patricia Farrell. Jennifer Mongolo in the Parks and Natural Resources Planning section is leading that effort, and she's working closely with our parks staff primarily, and anybody else in the city who hires consultants or themselves applies herbicides or pesticides. I know that they have done a lot of research into other IPM plans. I don't know specifically. I'd have to reach out to Jennifer unless Robert knows if they've contacted OSU specifically, or they're not using a consultant. I know that.
Yes, Robert Chandler, Assistant Director of Public Works. To my knowledge, we've not reached out for that.
Okay. Yeah, my only question on that would be if we do have time to include, I mean, not only OSU is just a great resource for all of us, but ODA being the ones who would regulate us and kind of cite us if we had any infractions on that, would be good to pull in their expertise to make sure that we're kind of, you know, getting all those T's and I's taken care of. I know that there's a lot of controversy around different uses of pesticides and whatnot, but I want to make sure that we maintain the flexibility that we need in order to address invasive species and the like, and to make sure that our staff has the tools at their disposal to make sure that we're doing it right, obviously, and making sure that we're following the label, but also just making sure that we're doing the most that we can, without causing more harm than good. I also was wondering if we are including burning as an option for maintaining our areas to kind of reduce the use of herbicides and pesticides in these areas. Is that a conversation that's happening?
I know that Parks has talked to DEQ and the fire department about the opportunity to use fire in some of the bigger parks, such as Minto. The problem being you're inside an urban area, and so air quality is a big concern. And so I think that conversation was started initially, and then we kind of put it on hold until we work through some of the details.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I also know that it would link to later on. I think one of the last items on the agenda today was CM22, which is reaching out to the tribes and making sure that tribal rights and traditions, that we're finding connections for those and space for those in our city. And so I know that this would be something that would link up with that as well. So I would be really interested to find out more and kind of pursue that path, especially in areas like Minto Brown. I know that we burn out at the Basket Slough, which isn't too far out of town, obviously not in an urban area, but that is maybe something that we can kind of lean on as far as expertise and recent years that they've done that kind of work.
Okay. Anyone else?
I have more questions, but I don't want to hog.
Well, go ahead.
the
Yeah,
meeting.
just keep going.
I'm sorry. Okay. In R07, you have the Urban Forestry Division. Do they need their own code compliance officers, or is that just a relationship that they have with our current code compliance officers? And there's just kind of overlap. Does that question make sense?
So I'll just step in. So NR07, ensure adequate funding for preservation maintenance of existing city trees. And we had provided some information on that about our division. Working through revisions through Salem Revised Code Chapter 808, the Forester reviews plans for protection and changes.
Yeah, and there it was noted that there's so much more work now, with the different codes that we're putting in, protections that we're putting in, and that they're just kind of having to rely on code compliance officers. And I was just wondering how that setup works right now. Does the urban forestry unit, need somebody for themselves to kind of help with enforcement, or do they just rely on code compliance officers? Because I know code compliance officers are already have a ton on their plate. So I guess I'm just wondering about the interactions there.
Here you go.
How does that work as far as who's with who? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let me jump in if I may. So Peter Fernandez, Public Works Director. So the Public Works Department has a compliance officer, Colin Armstrong. In fact, he works for Heather. He was hired to do a lot of the compliance work that's specific to Public Works, including street trees, which has become a big deal. Through his experience and knowledge on street trees, he actually is the expert on tree enforcement and actually supports compliance services and community development when it comes to trees. So he is, completely, what's the right word I want to use? Coordinated with compliance services. So he works closely with them. He does all the same training. But he works for us. So in effect, Counselor, what we have is exactly what you're saying. We do have a person that is doing that and supporting. At this point, I think that's all we need is the one. At some point in the future, we may need another, but we understood the problems. This was actually several years. How long has Cullen been with us now, Heather? 3 years, 4 years?
At least he's been here. I've been out here almost 5, and he came in about just before I did.
Just
I
before,
think.
so 5 or 6 years. So
Yeah.
we recognize that, a while ago that compliance services just didn't have the staffing to support the kind of the public works issues, trees, erosion control, site distance, any number of things. So we have our own individual that is doing that.
Great, thank you so much.
And if I could, again, Robert, Assistant Public Works Director, we'll be coming to council with some proposed revisions to Salem Revised Code Chapter 86, which is the tree code, taking into account some of the lessons learned over the past several years that makes it more clear, everything from notice of enforcement, restoration issues, and some modifications to our enforcement matrix.
Okay, great.
Yep.
To do with street trees on NR10, I was wondering if there's been any conversations around including the Care Corps program and the watering issues that we're running into with the new street trees. I know I was at a Care Corps meeting, I don't know, this was probably a month ago, and this kind of came up as an option. Could we work with the Care Corps program to enlist summer help from our high schoolers here to help with the watering program of new street trees? I know that's probably one of the biggest challenges there's lots of challenges, but it's a big challenge to water those trees for 3 years. And so I guess I wanted to ask that and maybe just kind of put a plug in that I think that would be something that'd be really a great partnership moving forward. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that before I ask my next question.
Yeah, we could certainly look into using that. All of the street trees that we plant on our contract comes with 3 years worth of watering. So we recognize the importance of having them watered. And unfortunately, sometimes it's a difficult to ask the adjoining property owner, the abutting property owner to water them. So we do pay for 3 years of watering to make sure that they're established, but we can certainly look into the program for any additional support. Certainly
Great.
For those that come with Patricia, I don't know if the Friends of Trees contract comes with a watering component or not, but I know the other part does.
Yes, Friends of Trees also has, I believe, 2 years of watering in their contract. I guess just
Okay, and I just have 2 more questions.
I'll just add, just as far as having volunteers or high school students watering, a lot of the trees are along busy streets and you need to have a water truck. I mean, that's the most efficient way to do it. So there are some kind of logistic complications there.
Yeah, we talked about that too in our meeting, trying to find a way to kind of get over those hurdles. I have 2 more questions. NR 13 is we're talking about trying to get trees planted on private property is one of the initiatives that y'all have, which is great. I noticed that my connection is not stable, so I apologize if I'm jittery. So one of the concerns was around maintenance of trees and leaves and the reason why folks didn't want to plant trees. And I know that we have the fall leaf haul every year as a resource for folks to bring leaves to us. But some folks don't have the resources to actually do that. And so I'm wondering, do we have any programs or have we had programs in the past where we go to you to pick up the leaves? Is that something that we offer or have offered in the past?
No, fall leaf haul is all we have.
Okay.
And the green
Okay.
bins.
And the green bins.
Yeah. Okay, the weekly pickup that occurs under there. A lot of people don't like to use that, but it's actually there.
Yep, I use mine every week.
Me too, year round.
And so my last question was about NR 20, which is about the water. I guess it had a lot to do with our different ways of watering and monitoring water. And I know that I just got a notice, and I couldn't find the email or the note that I made to myself about the request for public comment. And Peter, I'm sure you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, but there was one that just went out. It's on our stormwater management plan, I believe. And I was really interested in that. And so I clicked on it. And then I was reminded that I am not a water professional, because I could not hardly read that thing, because it is, right? It's for people who are water engineers, right? Or people who are really fascinated by or work in the system. And so my question to staff is always going to come back to communication and how we're reaching our public, and the fact that I care a lot about the changing climate and about possibly continuing our upcoming, the long-term drought that we've been in as the state, and then of course, upcoming droughts as they worsen. And I would love to provide feedback and I would love to engage, but when I open up this document and get lost in the technical nature of the document, it really limits my capacity as a citizen to participate in the process. And I'm wondering if there's other ways that we can, I understand that we need professional expertise and input on issues, but I would love to also hear or be able to participate just as a normal average citizen who is not a water engineer, and the concerns that I have moving forward, and how are we, what are our standards for water runoff? What are, the everyday conversations about water, what about gray water systems? I'm all about that. Like, how can we reach people where they're at? And get the passion that they are, or the curiosity that they have about issues without letting them just kind of open it up and then realize that they don't have access because they don't have the knowledge or the expertise to participate. So that would be my feedback on that one. Just trying to find better ways to engage the community with that.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Yeah, that's a good comment, Counselor. And we'll, we can take a look at that. There's a requirement to have public comment. We have done these kinds of things in the past. We don't get very many people in these kinds of workshops and stuff, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, put the word out. So, the rules require comment on the document, so we have to provide the document. What you're really talking about is could we have some kind of education, some kind of workshops of people who are interested, and we could certainly do that and put the word out, and we get who we get, and those who are interested, we can provide that kind of information and see what people want to talk about. So I appreciate that.
The other is plain language. I mean, maybe you have the technical as well as a plain language translation that would serve folks like me in Virginia who are interested, but aren't quite sure what you're talking about.
Yeah. We can certainly, we can think about that. There's we could probably work on some kind of simplified summary. Mm-hmm. I will say that, doing a lot of extra work to kind of translate it, quote unquote, into plain language for, if the mayor and the councilor want to read that, we certainly will do it. I don't know how many more people beyond that are.
I hear you, but one of it is a chicken and egg problem. Yeah. If they don't know, you don't hear from them. If they do know, will you hear from them? At least an attempt. I think.
No, that's a fair comment.
And it doesn't have to be a detailed plain language. Just here's what we're talking to you about. We want to know, kind of in real simple terms what you're after, and then they may make contact with you and ask the more detailed questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think we'll jump on that. Yeah, I appreciate those comments and those suggestions.
Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll just follow up on that one just briefly. I would say, Peter, it's really a communications issue and really something for the communications staff to work on, where they can, if they can understand it probably, or write it in a way that just the general public can understand it, and maybe not from the technical staff, because they speak a language that the vast majority of us don't speak. So I think it's really a communications issue. So, but my other question was, I wanted to circle back to Robert's comments on NR 07. And that's you mentioned that we're going to do some revisions to the code. And I wanted to just hear for a minute from you, if we're taking into account, I'm sure you are, but I would like to hear the detail on, we've had a couple of situations where it looks like developers may be just cutting down trees and taking the fines as kind of a cost of doing business. Are we doing anything to sort of disincentivize that behavior with these revisions?
Short answer is yes. We are incorporating similar to other violations of our code, a matrix that based on severity, should the person have known, is it a repeat offense? We've incorporated the nature of the trees as a consideration, whether it's a major, moderate, or minor violation. So the cost does go up. I will clarify that the code we're working on is trees on city-owned property, which is a separate section of our code than trees on private property. But we are addressing the severity of the code of the enforcement actions for those who violate the code.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
No, thanks. Good question.
Okay. Any further questions under the summary sheets area?
I have one more quick
Sure.
one. On NR 13, it was talking about how that we were wanting to do more frequent or find a way to do more frequent tree canopy assessments and communicate that with the community and with council. Are we testing it all or keeping a record of other ways that heat is showing up? I know there's the temperature, but what about the heat island effect? And then also I know that we've talked recently about the stream temperatures, which you have also emailed us about separately, Director Fernandez. I know that Councilor Varney would like to see more of those testing units throughout our stream network, but could you talk about that at all?
Well, let's talk about the canopy and then we'll talk about the stream. So Patricia or Robert.
I'll jump in, Patricia Farrell. So I know that after the ice storm, the Public Works IT folks actually did their own inventory to try to assess the damage from that. And it was a relatively, I'm not sure exactly how much it cost, but it was relatively inexpensive method that they used. And so there's been discussion about doing that on a more regular basis, because technically we're only required by code to do our inventory every 10 years, which, a lot can happen in 10 years, as we know. So I think that Public Works is going to continue to do those more frequent inventories, that are kind of they're looking at it from an aerial satellite kind of Landsat type of analysis. We also did a stream shade analysis update more recently to try to see where hot spots are or cool spots are along our streams, and that can help feed into our Goal 5 inventory as well. And then I can't remember the third part of your question.
That's mine. I got it. It's
Okay.
the stream monitoring stations.
Okay.
So yeah, I provided the city manager with information that I think he's going to be sharing with the council. But the bottom line is that we're constantly looking for new locations to install stream monitoring stations. They are very difficult to site because we need space to install it, and we need access from either the street or an easement to be able to get to them, to change out the monitoring equipment and to pick up the information to just kind of maintain them. So it's hard to they're hard to cite. There is one other location that we're looking at. We continually look for others, but we share Councilor Varney's desire to have more stations. It's just hard, and the manager has that information.
Do both of these, the tree canopy and the stream monitoring, does that give us a good grasp on what's happening with the heat island effect here locally in Salem?
I don't think the stream monitoring does, other than we just know the temperature of the water, which is really impacted by a lot of things. I don't know, Patricia, on the canopy.
The canopy is just one factor, right? And so the amount of impervious surfaces is another one, and just kind of the aspect of the sun, what's shaded, what's not. So there actually is an EPA site called heat.gov that we can use to map, and they've already done some mapping for major cities for Heat Island. And that's one of the things we're talking about. Heather's been talking to our IT group about getting that information put up on some sort of an interactive map, because one of the things we in many of the strategies is kind of doing specific targeted outreach to those that are most impacted by climate change, including Heat Island. So having that map is already kind of in development by other agencies, so we can kind of tie into that.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, let's move on then to early implementation strategy.
Okay, very good. Thank you everyone for your help with the questions today. Good questions as well. Great. So moving forward, I do have a number of slides. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I just wanted to give a little bit more in-depth update on where we're at on that early list. So let me pull this up. Can you confirm, please, that you're seeing my screen?
Yes.
Very good. Okay.
We have your screen, Heather, but you're still in setup mode, not presentation mode. Oh, there you go. Never mind.
Okay, awesome. All right, so just walk through actually quite a few slides here if I can. We'll move quickly. So just a quick reminder that really since June of this year, staff and the committee here today have been focused on a list of 55 early implementation priorities that were recommended by staff for a number of reasons. These were selected based on their recommended timeline to start, the initial cost to the city, greenhouse gas emission reduction potential, and a number of other factors that weighed in. This list, we're just looking at a snapshot here, the graphic on the right, but the list does encompass all 7 different category areas defined in the larger plan. So now, as is consistent with the entire climate action plan for Salem, this early list includes a mix of both activities designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as activities that are really focused on building or increasing resiliency to climate changes here in Salem. Specifically, in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, we've been looking at 17 different strategies in all that are either high or medium greenhouse gas reduction potential. And we've been looking at a larger subset of 38 that really are focused on education, engagement, the development of partnerships citywide, and increasing access to those in need to resources. So in looking back at where we're at to date here in October, of this list of 55 different strategies that we've been focused on, I'm able to document 6 that we can say have been completed and essentially checked off the list, although I would say we should continue to check in on all of these. There's 25 different activities that are in process or underway. We've got 7 additional activities that are pending, expected to start soon, primarily based on upcoming or current state rulemaking that's finalizing or just completed. And we do have 17 different strategies that have either not yet been initiated or are not underway in any way, shape, or form just yet. So hoping to walk through, give a closer look at these numbers. So starting here first, we've got the 6 different activities highlighted with white text. These are all of those that I've marked down as completed to date. The first 4 of these have been completed due to recent code amendments to Salem Revised Code designed to restrict on-street parking near transit, minimize setbacks to encourage density, require open space for multifamily developments, and increase protections for large canopy trees in Salem. The next one down here, TL 28, that has been put in place essentially from new requirements under the state building code that were, I believe, approved this last year under House Bill 2180. So those requirements require electrical service capacity for new development based on the associated parking for that development. And I've been informed by staff that once the building code adopts new regulations, the city follows as well. So finally, oops, I'm sorry, got a little ahead of myself. Just point out that we did complete in 2021 a new APP, or Administrative Policy and Procedure, that outlines working remote and flexible work options for staff here at the city. Okay, now, so moving forward, and we've got quite a few lists here. I'm not going to call each and every one out, but I wanted to make sure everything was documented. So activities that are indeed underway. TL 30, we have started the process to electrify the city-owned fleet. We're starting with first installing the necessary infrastructure, charging stations that will be needed for the hundreds of vehicles down the road. And we've also actually just recently made our first electrical vehicle purchase in stormwater. So moving on to others, development of new parking requirements and continued coordination with Chariots continues. We are working on an updated greenhouse gas emissions inventory as we speak. And staff are very near to finalizing an update to the city's sustainable purchasing policy. So in the area of natural resources, which these were the long summary sheets that we provided you this month, we can say that the integrated pest management plan, which we spoke of, actually it is well underway, if not very close to being finished, is my understanding. We are continuing efforts to increase Salem's tree canopy, as well as to provide outreach and information to Salem residents on the benefits of trees. And we are soon to be bringing on a consultant to help support in the development of an accurate inventory of Salem wetlands, riparian areas, and available wildlife per State Planning Goal 5. But that's not all. So moving forward, there's a number of communication related strategies in the plan, and I can say that staff are continuously and continuing to look at new ways to improve and to increase the engagement with our community, as well as different ways of bringing more voices, diverse voices to the table for decision making. As well, there's a number of strategies related to our efforts with the local tribes, as was mentioned earlier. And staff continue to meet. I believe there's monthly meetings underway that continue per agreements with the local tribes. So staff continue to meet and collaborate with our tribes on a routine basis, and will continue to do so. Okay, so several activities that are not yet underway, but are anticipated to begin soon. These first four, pertain to upcoming updates to the Salem Transportation System Plan, updates associated with the new climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking that was just completed, or are associated with DEQ's new commute trip reduction program that is currently under development. A few others that are poised to move forward shortly include upcoming public engagement activities, also associated with the CFEC or climate friendly rulemaking and other actions. Sustainable specifications for city bidding, that is something that will be coming shortly as soon as the policy is completed, it's my understanding, the sustainable purchasing policy. And then finally, I wanted to touch on this TL 15, support for super transit networks. This is something that I think staff are primarily going to be watching for opportunities and potential legislation to open up such that we could support extensions of rail service through Salem. But I did want to point out before we move on that we did hear just this last month from ODOT that the city of Wilsonville has drafted a legislative concept that would extend the West Side Express commuter rail that currently terminates in Wilsonville down to Salem. So the concept actually is suggesting that ODOT first partake in a technical study. There's a number of studies and things, coordination that will be needed, obviously, with that effort. So as proposed, that concept was approved by their city council this month. So we'll stay tuned and be watching the legislature this next year to see if there's anything drafted that moves forward that we could support. And then before moving on to the activities not yet underway, I did want to just highlight that we've also, in addition to the list of 55 we are working through public feedback and other feedback from staff and others, we've actually added 7 different activities to the list that we've looked at and provided summary sheets. I can say that we can confirm that EN 18, which was an activity to allow and incentivize smaller cluster development in ADUs, that was completed per code. And in fact, ADUs are presently exempt from system development charges in Salem. Underway, we've learned that Chariots, through our presentation and meetings, a number of meetings with Chariot staff, that they are indeed working to increase bus service in Salem, as well as efforts to reach underserved areas. And a lot of that's tied to their long-range plan that is presently underway. Also, not pointed out in the sheet is that they are also looking to electrify their fleet moving forward. Let's see, we have work with partners to create microgrids, EN 29, just pointing out that staff did submit a grant application to the Oregon Department of Energy in partnership with Portland General Electric to construct what would be the state's first community microgrid. So hoping to hear more on that soon. And it's, I understand, October 10th, actually, we are expected to hear something one way or another. So looking forward to that. And we've also learned that staff are indeed looking at the potential for new pay structure and policy for solid waste rate setting here in Salem. So that work has just got started. I believe really 2023, early next year, staff will be able to devote more time to that. Couple of activities that we've touched on briefly that we're not yet working on include looking at other options to send our municipal waste beyond Covanta or beyond Coffin Butte. That's something that we just haven't initiated just yet. And then we did hear from Department of Energy, and we've heard from others on a potential ordinance that would require a home energy score in Salem. And that's not something that we've moved on just yet either. We're still learning. And I could take a brief pause for questions if there are any, or I can continue to move into the actions that are not yet underway.
Go ahead, Heather.
Very good. Okay, so moving forward, actions not yet in motion. This first page actually lists out strategies that we have not yet provided any summary sheets or information on. These are scheduled to come next month, but we have started looking at these. And at this point, it's clear that that we haven't yet done a baseline or waste tracking diversion rate for Salem to figure out how much waste is being diverted from our landfill in Covanta. We've not yet set goals to reduce waste at city-funded events or initiated any kind of large-scale citywide behavior campaign on waste reduction, which I think it would be good to start.
Are you going to, Heather, are you all going to need because we've had it asked about a number of times, maybe looking at a broader solid waste, I don't know whether it's a committee or where you have a group of engaged citizens and counselors to interact with. Will that be part of this?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. I know that staff have just started to do research and intend to start drafting up policy work next year, but I can reach out.
I know there's been a lot of interest among interested parties in the community to be involved. Yeah, Virginia.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as she was speaking, and I'm with you on that, Mayor. I think there's a lot of people who are interested and it might be good to reach out to them to see what their thoughts are on this. So it's not fully on us or fully on staff to figure this out. When I was in conversations about this earlier, we were talking, and I think, Chris, this came from you, that there was something coming down from the state, rules about reducing the waste upstream, right? So in the manufacturing process. Is that something that we're also kind of, I mean, I know a lot of these other goals that we have here are dependent on state rules. And so are there state rules that would apply to this metric or this goal that we're just not listing here?
There are state rules, and I can't for the life of me think of what those are. I know that staff and I spoke about them when we met a couple months back to talk about the current rate setting process. So I know that staff are looking at that, well aware, and it does, you're right, it does require, there's certain requirements for producers to create materials that are recyclable or have certain contents that are recyclable. So that is definitely going to factor in somehow, at least to the waste, the rate setting process, if not other strategies as well.
Chris, Virginia was asking if you're aware of any activities at the legislative level, whether enacted or contemplated.
Yes, there are some new legislation, and I know Ryan Zink has been a part of that committee and working on those, and he's actively engaged in that process. Yeah, there's a whole new framework coming out for waste reduction at the manufacturer level and that sort of thing. So yeah, a whole bunch of new stuff coming on that.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be good to include that here, just so we kind of spread the workload again, right? Like, it's not all up to us city councilors here in Salem. It's a bigger problem, and that we're getting and the work that we've given Ryan to do around waste reduction and around our franchise agreements. Does that overlay with this at all? And maybe that's just a question to think about, you know, does his work influence this? And is there work that we're doing here that can also be included? Does he need to be part of this conversation, or that's my question, I guess.
So I can say that Ryan Zink is the gentleman that I met with to get information about this. So I know that he's working on it. I know he's really well aware of the climate action plan and the other regulations that were just mentioned. So if that answers your question.
Okay.
Okay, good. So moving forward, other activities not underway beyond the waste reduction. We've not yet started work with partners, started to engage with SEDCOR and others on a climate smart entrepreneur program, which is listed in the plan. And we've not dove into partnerships yet as well that will support local food networks. And finally, just touch quickly on this. We have not yet had the discussion about hiring or having a dedicated full-time climate action plan manager. That is something that I do hope to bring back to this committee in November to discuss fully.
Good. Okay.
So as well, we've not yet looked at the potential for charging for city-controlled parking in the downtown core area. We've not yet developed a public reward system for energy efficiency here in Salem, or a weatherization program that really hits low-income residents here in the community. I will say to that third bullet, EN 14 on the weatherization, we did learn from the Community Action Agency that they are indeed looking at some potential grant funding through the Oregon Health Authority under the Healthy Homes program that would give them funding to support that kind of program at their level. So hoping that they will be able to take a lead, at least initially, on that. Continued code amendments that will work to increase shade over parking lots is something that we have not yet done, and I understand that staff are indeed waiting for the finalization of the CFEC, the Climate Friendly Equitable Communities rulemaking, before any further adjustments would be made to our code. Not yet compensating participants for providing input into the planning processes. I will say that I think staff has just begun to start looking at what that might be, compensation in a number of forms. So maybe that's something that's coming. We've not yet begun the good work of engaging our residents here in Salem, most likely to be impacted by climate change, unfortunately, yet another thing that we need to start soon. And we learned from Portland General Electric just last month that they are indeed working on a green municipal tariff program, community-wide clean energy program. But that's still under this, the work on that is still underway. They, and as well, they will need to get approval from the Oregon Public Utilities Commission before that is even finalized and can be shared as an option to Salem and other communities. And a quick reminder, we already touched on these quickly, that we're not yet looking at other landfills, and we have not yet made any decisions to move on either a requirement to for home energy scores or to encourage home energy scores at property time of sale. Finally, 3 additional strategies not yet underway. This is that list of 17 again. So we learned from Energy Trust of Oregon last month about all the different energy incentives, technical advice, and programs that they have regarding electric and other efficient energy systems. We're not yet promoting those, but I think that's something we could jump on soon. We have made improvements, EN12, a number of improvements, in fact, to our municipal facilities over the years. And we're looking to hopefully replace the boiler at Willow Lake. I think that's coming per another grant application. So we're looking at different opportunities, but what we have not yet done is really take a comprehensive look at the energy use in our buildings, kind of start to set benchmarks as was recommended by Department of Energy a couple months back, and goals to move forward. And I think that's something, again, that we could start on relatively soon. And we mentioned CMO1. We've started talking with GIS staff already about the need to pull in primarily what they're looking at initially is demographic data, just general population, age, diversity data, and pull that all together into kind of a single platform or source that's easy and consistent for staff. Once we would have that built, I think there's clearly a need, and there's a lot of opportunity identified in this plan to pull in other environmental kind of data sets. You mentioned the heat island, and I'm sure that we could look at energy, I think energy deficits, other kind of environmental impact data that we could look out to and pull into that same tool. I think that's a need moving forward. So almost done with the slides here. Just looking forward now to the next steps. And when I say next steps, what I'm really speaking to is kind of the next few months through the remainder of 2022. I would propose that we do start on those last 3 as kind of a next quick step, that we do start promoting energy incentives through each ETO. And we can do that in a number of ways. I think we can really start pulling information together and placing that in a accessible space that's easy to get to on our website. We can work with planning and development staff and see if there's other options that they could kind of help to share some of the messaging. It's something that we could start on soon, I think, and that was listed as a high greenhouse gas reduction potential strategy, actually. EN12, again, we really need to, I think, take a step back and kind of examine the energy use, at least in a couple different buildings. And I think it would be worthwhile to look at that Energy Star tool that the Department of Energy had recommended a couple months back to kind of set benchmarks, compare our buildings to other buildings of similar uses, and really just kind of dive into assessing the energy use in our own facilities. Once we do that, we might start looking then at having a consultant or a qualified energy advisor come in and make those recommendations on what the next steps for improvements might be. But that strategy in particular is really one that's going to feed into another of other strategies where we're recognizing other businesses and members of the community. We're creating a climate kind of reward system, an energy reward system throughout the community. So I think first it makes sense to maybe start with our own buildings. And then we've already had a discussion about the GIS environmental screening tool. So we just need to commit the staff time and start researching the data that would be needed for that.
Heather, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, please.
Thanks. I guess my question is, sorry, I'm trying to lower my hand here and that's proving to be difficult while talking. Okay. My question is about, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but about community outreach and communications. And, you know, a lot of times when I think about the climate action plan, I get really excited, but also really frustrated because this is not something that the city of Salem proper, the staff, is going to be able to do for our community alone, right? And so reaching out to other partners, whether it's Salem Kaiser Public Schools or transit or large businesses that are here like Amazon or Salem Health or whatever, and having them sign on or co-sign on to the Salem Climate Action Plan to show solidarity. And to show that we're all in this together, that it's not only government, but business and other public services. But then also, you know, finding some way to rally the everyday average citizen here in Salem to not only care about this, but pay attention and to also understand their impact for the city as a whole. I mean, this is a global issue. We can't do this alone. Everybody has to be involved. And so, you know, I know that we have different pledges that people can take for like the streams or, you know, water reduction or whatever. But, you know, and I also know that we're down on communications staff, but how can we start a public campaign of local engagement for our residents? Is there, you know, something that we can do that's, you know, that can get people something in their home that reminds them that they're part of the solution, right? Whether it's a poster that we create that we send to people who sign up or some way that people can put, you know, signs in their yard that they're active participants in reducing their own emissions, or just different ways that people can pledge and get involved, I think is going to be really key. And I also would love to see not kind of just glaze over this, other members in our community signing on in support. You know, if Salem Kaiser Public Schools wants to sign on in support of the Salem Climate Action Plan, that's huge. If Salem Health or Amazon, right, can they sign on? Can they get their name on our website saying that they are supporters of this plan and what they're doing to reduce their emissions, right? You start to get this community energy going, and it starts to really move forward. And it's not just us putting in charging stations at City Hall, right? Like I want to get excitement. I want to get people involved. And I know that all of this work is really, really good work, but without everybody on board, it's hard to push this wagon alone. Does that make sense?
I wonder,
Absolutely.
Virginia, if that isn't a really good segue into looking ahead. I understand what you're saying, and it would be that kind of communication planning, that level of civic engagement is a very interesting direction you may want to take in the future. At this point, it's just getting through this thing and getting the parts of it are just getting our charging stations in, but I think you're describing a next step. So maybe that's where that could fit, is as we look forward to looking ahead that topic area.
Yes, I agree.
Unless you've got a real
100.
quick answer for that, Heather. That's a pretty complicated question.
Well, it is. Yeah, I don't have a quick answer, but I will say that I agree 100% that that's a big need. And clearly, you know, it's identified throughout the plan, the need for partnerships, the need for community outreach and engagement, education. It's a huge part, quite frankly, of the plan itself. And there's a couple of activities that were called out in this early implementation list. You know, we mentioned the waste reduction, but overall, just education and education campaign on this plan itself is another one that's not in this early list that I think is dearly needed that we could start on. Again, there's just a number of them at quick glance. I think last week we started looking at least 40 different strategies in the larger plan that hit on partnerships or engagement. So it's something that needs to happen. And I did call that out on this slide. I don't yet have an answer on exactly. It makes sense to me that we would take a closer look at all of those different strategies as laid out and kind of find ways to maybe start grouping some of those together into larger campaigns. But I don't have that exactly figured out just yet. I know that we need to reorganize, clean up the information that's on our web page to start. You mentioned being kind of complicated, some of the information. I think what we have up there now could be simplified, and we could start bringing in new materials, new messaging that speaks to some of the actions that we're already doing and speak to things that people can do at home. So I think that there is a big need for that. And that's something I was hoping to start looking at, quite frankly, in the next couple of months. I think it's big. So
I hope that'll be part of the job description or the expectations of a climate plan manager, that
Yeah.
will be one of their jobs, is to establish that kind of direction for the council. Will have to play a huge role in that, as well as for staff and allied organizations. And it's going to be a really interesting. I think what Virginia's hitting on is the kind of thing we all hope will come out of this. Okay.
great. Thank
Okay,
you. And-
looking ahead, what else are we looking ahead to?
Well, I think we've touched on all of these. We're working on the emissions report, looking at education, and the only other item we didn't check in on is that there is an update underway to the natural hazard mitigation plan. So I'll be sitting in, at least for now, on the steering committee for that, and that's going to be a pretty big effort.
Okay.
And yet again, as you mentioned, I do hope to bring a discussion next month about that full-time climate action manager position.
Will you bring a job? What do you think you'll bring, Heather? Will it be a job description, or I'm wondering how specific you'll be in terms of talking about that, because that sounds like a really key position coming as we move forward.
Yes, thank you. I hadn't fleshed out exactly what materials to bring, but I think we were initially thinking just kind of more of a high level discussion at first. We need to look at the budget authority for that and where that position might reside. So I think that's primarily what we're looking at, but we definitely would need to start looking at what that position needs to include as well. So
maybe a couple of job descriptions. I assume other cities or entities have hired someone in this capacity. If there was a way to bring maybe a couple of job descriptions just to look at what are others expecting of people doing this job, might be helpful for counselors to kind of look at, to see kind of what are we talking about, and salary ranges. What is this?
Yeah.
What is this job?
That
Yeah,
sounds
Mayor,
great.
we will certainly do that.
Okay.
The biggest issue, of course, at the city of Salem is budgetary.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think that having those numbers and that kind of expectation, and the support staff or whatever support that they need to have, will be helpful in informing both the council as well as the manager, if there's an expectation here as to kind of what to look for.
Yeah, we have some ideas. We've already,
Okay.
We certainly didn't want to be floating ideas without the manager knowing what the ideas are.
Right.
So, we didn't want to put him into a pickle 3 weeks into his tenure.
Yeah.
So, so he's well aware, but of what we're going to propose here in the next month. So, so there'll be lots to talk about.
Okay, great.
And that's all the slides that I have. I'm going to stop.
Could you give us a copy of your slide deck? Could you send that out
Yes.
to us? Great.
Be happy to. Okay, and I realize we are very close to the end of the hour, which is good. We did have one other
Perfect
item
work.
on the agenda.
Okay. Excellent.
Are we okay quickly hitting on item number 5, which is just looking ahead at these meetings?
Very briefly, I have another meeting at 11.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to cut it short. Is there anything, Chris, you want to have talked about in November?
No, I defer to Heather.
Yeah. Okay, Virginia, anything? You've mentioned several things. I think they've got a list. I think we're set to go. I think the one thing
Okay.
that would be very helpful is to get a look, if you're ready,
Yeah.
at this management position you're talking about around this. I think that'll be an interesting piece of information, and particularly in November, where you're actually starting to look at I assume the manager's putting together his budget now and give him a sense of kind of what the ground looks like. So excellent.
Sounds
Well,
good.
thank you very much. If there's nothing more, we're adjourned. Thank you.
All righty,
Thanks
thank you all.
Okay.